Hi, everybody. Welcome back to this episode of Strategy, Leadership, and Impact. Hope you've been well since the last episode. I don't know if anybody's noticed, but I had the big break in between episodes while I was writing one of my books. And during that time, Anchor, which is the platform that I use to publish my episodes and publish the podcast, was bought out by Spotify. So now it's Spotify for podcasters instead of Anchor. And during that time too, one of the changes are they've changed the ability to be able to add in different music and things like that on the website itself. And I'd actually created my previous intro and outro to the podcast just using those preset things or the free things that were available to me. And so the last episode I did and this episode don't have those in them. And at first I thought, oh no, that's not good. I need to come up with the new intro, new outro. But then I listened back to some of the older podcasts and these newer ones and thought, wow, they actually don't sound too bad without those. I don't miss them. But I really want to see what you think as the listener. So I know sometimes when I listen to certain podcasts and the intro's too long or the outro's too long with all the music and they use special effects music throughout the episode, it really bothers me. Like I don't like it. Like just get to the point, get into the talking, tell me what it is you're going to tell me. So I want to know, what do you think? Do I need to add in an intro and an outro again, or just leave it as is with nothing and just get straight into the podcast? Really want to know your thoughts. Today's topic really is a bit topical, I guess, kind of front and foremost of a lot of people's minds, and it's around leadership in times of crisis. And if you turn on the news or look at any news website nowadays, you're hearing of constant crises happening with natural disasters, for example, cyclones, floods, bushfires, you name it, it runs the gamut. But there's a number of things that kind of fall into that crisis category that we can look at. And lately I've been heavily involved with developing up a new emergency management plan for the organization I work for our region. And so that's really got me thinking about crisis, but not just natural disasters, but also cybersecurity and a bunch of other areas. And that's, I guess, what prompted me to do this podcast. And you think about, well, what are some of the differences in leadership that I should be using during a time of crisis versus day to day? What are some other considerations that I need to take into account, for example, during a crisis? So, leadership in a time of crisis is a critical and challenging task, and it does require a unique set of skills and qualities. And again, like I mentioned just before, a crisis can come in various forms, such as a natural disaster, economic downturn, pandemics like with COVID, what we saw, social and political unrest, which fortunately here in Australia, we don't see that too much, but you may see it in little pockets. And during these difficult times, effective leadership becomes even more crucial to navigate through those uncertainties, providing guidance, inspiring confidence among individuals and sometimes whole communities. And just want to share with you a few key principles and qualities that are important for you as a leader to lead during a time of crisis. So the first one I want to talk about is calmness and composure. Leaders must retain a calm and composed even in the face of just complete chaos and uncertainty, and you need to control your emotions and project stability, and this instills confidence in others. So when they look to you as a leader, and you're just that rock, not dumb as a rock, but you're just that steadfast force that's there, and you stay calm. One, staying calm actually helps you think a bit better, but it also gives everybody else, it calms the team too, and they kind of gives them that sense, okay, things are bad, they're in control. That's one of the reasons why you need to keep that calmness and that composure about you. One of the things, a technique you can actually use is that 4-square breathing. If you find yourself really getting worked up and really getting emotional, just pause for a second. Breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, and then hold it for 4 seconds, and then just keep repeating that cycle 2 or 3 times, and you'll actually find yourself starting to relax. And as you do that, where you have those blinders on, you're really focused on one thing, as you're really getting spun up, you'll find that field of view will start opening up, your heart rate will start coming down, you'll actually be a bit more calmer, and you'll be able to control the situation. And then number 2, the next one is providing clear communications. Leaders should always communicate clearly, consistently, and transparently, even more so during times of crisis. So we want to be as accurate and timely as possible whenever we deliver information to people that are affected by the crisis, whether that's your workforce, a work team, or a whole community. by doing that, effective communications helps manage expectations, but also it alleviates fears and it alleviates people filling in the blanks with their own assumptions. So if they know what's going on, it helps calm them as well. But also, if they don't know what's going on, people assume. And whenever they start making assumptions about either what's happening or what's going to happen, it just makes things that much worse. But also by communicating clearly and consistently too, you can promote unity across your team. And then they have this whole, unity of message, but unity of understanding across your team or community, whatever it is. And again, that's one of the reasons why you want to communicate clearly during a time of crisis. The next one, number 3, is decisiveness. Sometimes we can lead by consensus outside of a crisis, but during a crisis, sometimes even more so, you need to lead decisively. It requires you to make tough decisions under pressure sometimes in crisis. And you need to be able to analyze the situation, weigh your available options, and make timely decisions. Even with incomplete information, a lot of times you'll be acting on some ambiguity, but you need to make a decision and start moving in one direction. So delaying decisions and not making a decision or waiting until you have more and more information, you can actually make the crisis worse, but also erode trust. People are going to be looking to you to make decisions. And sometimes you need to communicate clearly, like we said before, around the fact that you may be making decisions quite quickly, and it may change things quite quickly too. And I'll give you an example. I used to do a lot of training, particularly in firefighting and different skills around firefighting. And I would tell people they would get frustrated. You go to a fire, for example, and things are very dynamic and they're moving very quickly and you're trying to control the situation. And that officer that's in charge of that job or that call, they're going through their mind. And we use something called RECIO. So rescue, exposures, for example. So that's the first 2 things that they're trying to do. Okay, I'm into rescue. I'm protecting my exposures. Now I can go into a containment phase, for example, then an extinguishment phase, and then an overhaul phase. So, and as they're doing this, their first thing they're trying to do is control that situation and get it under control so they don't make things worse. And a lot of times that's what you need to do too, get things under control. And sometimes you just need to get people going in a certain direction and try something. And then as soon as you realize that's working, okay, we're going to support that, or it's not working, we need to change. You need to make those decisions very quickly. And the better you understand your capabilities and the capabilities of your team, the better you can actually make those decisions and the quicker you can make those decisions. So that brings us number 4, empathy and support. In a crisis, it brings about emotional and psychological distress, particularly with the fear of the unknown or potentially what's happened. You need to demonstrate empathy, that understanding and compassion toward those people affected. And if it's your area, if it's your community, for example, that's affected, and your people that are helping you get through this disaster live in that community, high chances are that their families are affected. They're affected themselves. Their properties that they own are affected. The amount of impact on your team, and your team, it could be impacted to the point to where they're not actually suitable to use in order to address that disaster at that time. If it is, you need to take that into account. A lot of people, I think, really, they expect that the emergency services people, they're always going to be there. They expect that the local council's always going to be there. But whenever it's that area that's affected, they're affected too. They're not superhuman. They need to look after their families first, make sure that they're safe, make sure that nothing's going to happen to them, make sure they have food and water and those basic necessities of life in order for them to come in and be effective and work effectively. If they're worried in the back of their mind or they're still trying to get their family to safety, you might have just let them go and do that. So don't expect that you're going to have your whole team there, if any at all. And if that happens, of course, then you need to understand where your resources are and pull them in from the outside. Whenever they do come in, you need to actively listen to their concerns. Whenever you're out in the community, actually listen to their concerns. And then where possible, you can provide support or get additional resources in to help that out. And so number 5, adaptability and flexibility. Crisis, as we know, they're completely unpredictable. They're unpredictable when they're going to happen, what the extent's going to be, how long they're going to last, and what the recovery time's going to be and how you're going to recover. And it may require you to adapt your strategies, change your plans. And sometimes it could be quite rapidly. Other times it may be a bit slower. It's really hard to tell and define what exactly is going to happen, even if it's the same type disaster, bushfires, for example. You had a bushfire last year. This year you have another bushfire. Could be in a completely different space, could move quicker, could move slower, could affect people in different ways. You have no idea how it's going to play out. So you really need to have that adaptability and that flexibility. So I think it's Mike Tyson that made the statement that everybody has a plan until they get hit in the mouth. Well, that disaster is going to hit you in the mouth, or that crisis is going to hit you in the mouth. And no matter how well you've developed all your plans to address these, the majority of it might not be any good, but you need to be able to react and do something. So number 6, collaboration and teamwork. Effective crisis leadership involves bringing together diverse perspectives and expertise. And you need to work to foster that collaboration among your team members and stakeholders and whoever it might be, relevant authorities, whether they be state, federal level, and leverage the collective resources of all those in order to address the crisis that you're facing and the crisis that you're going through to get through it the best possible way. Don't forget that everybody that's there that you're leading, they all have the same goal, and that's to get everybody through the crisis, to get everybody to that new normal, whatever that is, and that's part of that recovery. And then number 7 is ethical and values-based leadership, and I think my next episode might be on ethical leadership. Really, it's upholding those ethical standards and displaying integrity, and that's very essential during a crisis. You need to make good decisions based on ethical principles and prioritize the well-being of those affected and the greater good. So the greater good, that's incredibly important. But one, you can't be selfish during those times. Even though you might have a family, you might need to look out for yourself. You need to make sure you're in a good position in order, just like your team, in order to be able to serve others. But you can't make unethical decisions to get through something. You still need to make those ethical decisions, and sometimes they're going to be the hardest decisions to make. And I think that's a topic for a whole nother podcast episode. And then number 8, resilience and optimism. I did a whole podcast about what is resilience. Now I'll look up that episode number and probably put it in the show notes. But you need to demonstrate resilience both personally and as a guiding force for others. Again, they're going to be looking to you to set the example. You need to keep that positive outlook, and you need to inspire hope. And that's one of the best ways you can do it. Always look toward the positive side. You need to, sometimes even though you might not know exactly how you're going to get through this, if you are affected and you're worried, that's okay to tell your team, look, I'm concerned about what might happen here. I'm concerned about the things that are happening. That's okay. That's being human. But at the same time, too, I'm concerned, but together we're going to get through this. We're going to make it through this. And it can encourage individuals and encourage your communities to persevere. And if they see you up there leading, from the front, they're more likely to feel calmer about that and actually see that resilience and that, okay, I feel reassured. We're going to make it through this. Everything's going to be okay. We're going to get to that new normal on the other side. And then learning and adaptation. This kind of comes back to, that's number 9, by the way. This kind of comes back to point 5 around the adaptability and flexibility. So crisis, whatever it is, they're often valuable learning experiences. And you need to promote that culture of continuous learning and analyzing what has happened during the crisis from the response, identifying your lessons learned during the crisis, and implementing those improvements, what you have learned in the future preparedness. One of the organizations that I have done some work with went through an IT or a cybersecurity breach, and the learnings that came out of that and reviewing what's happened post that. One for my own learning, just about, here in Australia, the Australian Signals Directorate have come out with the Essential 8, and there's a maturity model around those Essential 8, but learning that and saying, okay, these are the Essential 8 key cornerstone things around cybersecurity that I need to be looking at. Where's the organization at along that scale of maturity, and how does it fit, and how do we actually get to those most mature scale, or the most mature end of that scale, to ensure that we actually have very sound cybersecurity protections in place, for example. So there's always learnings in these. And if we fail to learn, I think really we're going to fail next time, even worse potentially, whenever we are faced with something very similar. And then number 10 is a long-term vision. So while that immediate crisis management is crucial, effective leaders also need to consider the long-term implications and work toward building resilience and preparedness for future crisis. Like I've mentioned a couple times here, you kind of need to see what's that new normal look like, because recovery portion of a crisis isn't about going back to where you were before or getting things back to that same normal. It's about the new normal. And that's where we actually implement some of these things that actually prepares for the next crisis. So it actually helps to be better prepared for that whenever we find out what that new normal is, or define what that new normal is, to be able to do that, and then we're developing strategies to prevent or mitigate similar situations. And really that enhances our organizational but also our community resilience too. So we know, okay, we made it through this. These are lessons learned. We put them in. More than likely, next time it hits, we might not be as effective, but whenever we do, we're going to come out the other end and things are going to go back to another new normal, whatever that is. Just remember that leadership in times of crisis, it's not solely the responsibility of individuals in positions of authority either. Leadership, it can emerge from various levels and areas within the organization and the community too. From other community leaders, individuals who step up to address the needs. And, you get spontaneous volunteers sometimes that want to step forward. They may or may not have skills in that area, but they really just want to help and do whatever they can to help to meet the needs of their community. So don't discount them either. And effective crisis leadership, it's a collective effort. At the end of the day, it's a collective effort, and it requires collaboration and coordination among multiple stakeholders, multiple agencies, multiple communities, multiple different organizations, industry, etc. Everybody working toward that same goal of getting to the end of getting through whatever that crisis is that you're facing. So if you think about times of crisis, these are the times when your true leadership skills really show. But this is also the time that you can really step forward and develop those leadership skills, just kind of keeping some of these things in mind of a starting point for you to lead from. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. If you want to connect with me, please just look me up on LinkedIn, Blake Repine. I'm on there. You can also send me an email, blakerepine@gmail.com. And if there's any subject you'd like for me to do a podcast on, or anyone you'd like for me to interview as well, I will be doing some more interviews. Please let me know, and we'll talk to you next time.